Hey there, bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. Without ratings and warning labels, finding which books are appropriate for your children to read is like navigating wild terrain without a map and a compass. I don't know about you, but I have been burned more than once handing my child a book that I thought was clean and appropriate for them to read. I'm a fellow mom, educator, reading specialist, and literary enthusiast trying to find great books for my children and yours to read. So if you're looking for real reviews from a mom with a biblical worldview, then welcome and enjoy this week's book review. If you've been following me for a while, then you know that I do a lot of reviews for Jennifer A. Nielsen. She is one of my favorite middle grade writers, and I had never read one of her fantasy series, which is called The False Prince. So this week's book review is for The False Prince. It is in our local library listed under young adult fiction. But if you go to like Amazon or something like that, they're going to put the age a little bit younger. However, I would keep this as a young adult fiction. So definitely for more so for teen readers than, early middle school, late elementary school for sure. Mainly because the characters are that age and there is some violence in here, more so than you see in her historical fiction. Not in the sense that there's obviously war and bombs and people die and those things, but there's not a lot of details to those where, at least details that could be disturbing. But in here, and in this series, there is some violence that could potentially be a little bit disturbing, especially, like one of the characters has a noose, put around his neck. So I definitely, just, a word of caution or just to set up forefront that I definitely think this series is more for teens than for, your early middle grade, late elementary readers. So with all of that being said, this was definitely a fantasy series that I picked up. And so I've started it. I can't remember if there's 4, maybe 5 books in this series. This particular story follows Sage, and he is an orphan, but he has been purchased from an orphanage by a nobleman, Connor, in order to be part of an upcoming scheme. So along with 2 other orphans, Rodin and Tobias, they are taken to Connor's estate to begin their 2-week training competition to become Connor's false prince to present to the Council of Regents. So before I go too much further, I am going to read just a little bit of the first chapter. I'm not going to go too far, but I just kind of want to introduce a little bit of the story to you, the character, the writing style. If I had to do it all over again, I would not have chosen this life. Then again, I'm not sure I ever had a choice. These were my thoughts as I raced away from the market with a stolen roast tucked under my arm. I'd never attempted roast thievery before, and I was already regretting it. It happens to be very difficult to hold a chunk of raw meat while running. More slippery than I'd anticipated. If the butcher didn't catch me with his cleaver first and literally cut off my future plans, I vowed to remember to get the meat wrapped next time, then steal it. He was only a few paces behind now, chasing me at a better speed than I'd have expected for a man of his girth. He yelled very loudly in his native language, one I didn't recognize. He was originally from one of the far western countries, undoubtedly a country where killing a meat thief was allowed. It was this sort of thought that encouraged me to run faster. I rounded a corner just as the cleaver suddenly cut into a wood post behind me. Even though he was aiming for me, I couldn't help but admit his throwing accuracy. If I hadn't turned when I did, the cleaver would have found its target. But I was only a block from Mrs. Turbidity's orphanage for disadvantaged boys. I knew how to disappear there. And I might have made it if not for the bald man sitting outside the tavern who stretched out his foot in time to trip me. Luckily, I managed to keep hold of the roast, although it did no favor to my right shoulder as I fell onto the hard dirt road. The butcher leaned over me and laughed. "'Bout time you get what's coming to you, filthy beggar." As a point of fact, I hadn't begged for anything. It was beneath me. His laughter was quickly followed up with a kick to my back that chased my breath away. I curled into a ball, prepared for a beating I wasn't sure I'd live to regret. The butcher landed the second kick and had reared back for a third when another man shouted, "Stop." The butcher turned. "You stay out of this. He stole a roast." "An entire roast, really? And what is the cost?" 30 garlands. My well-trained ears heard the sound of coins in a bag. Then the man said, "I'll pay you 50 garlands if you turn that boy over to me now." And so that sort of begins the introduction of Connor into the story and the connection that later develops with Sage. So as Sage finds out from Connor, the king and queen, along with Prince Darius, have been poisoned. Prince Jaren has been presumed dead for the last 4 years, and with the recent deaths of the royal family, Carthia's regents must crown a new king. That is, unless Prince Jaren really is alive and can claim the throne for himself. So Connor's plan is to keep Carthia from civil war and siege from outside nations by training up a false prince to take the throne. His motives appear to be altruistic, but as Sage and the reader soon learn, Connor is more nefarious than at first appears to be. And ultimately, his hope is that he can basically control whatever king it is that he puts on this throne. So meanwhile, Sage, Roden, and Tobias, they have to compete to be chosen by Connor. Their fate is death should they not make the cut. So they have every incentive to compete and do their best. This definitely creates tension between the boys and leads to physical scars. Parents and readers will be happy to know that the story is clean. There's no profanity, there's no unsavory situations. However, there is some violence throughout the story. Nothing that's super graphic other than with the noose. There is some whipping that takes place. So there is another orphan at the opening of the book who is killed. He is shot with an arrow when he plans to leave the group. Again, Sage is whipped for his insolence and defiance of Connor. A soldier is stabbed by Sage, and there is a final sword battle towards the end of the novel. So that is some of the violence. Again, not super graphic. However, putting a noose around someone's neck and some of the other things in there. I have made some note of some things on my full written review at holdingsteadfastreaders.com. Parents, I encourage you to go and check that out just to get a little bit more detail of what are some things that might be of concern on different pages of the story. I have those listed there. There's also some points if they're like a good quote, something like that. That's been included. Towards the end, Roden is chosen as Connor's prince, but soon something is revealed that changes everything. So the plot twist will definitely intrigue your reader and lead them to wanting book 2. Book 1 does wrap up well, but with a looming war possible, that peaceful moment is definitely not intended to last. So I don't want to give too much away of the story. There's a lot of intrigue and a lot of development there. But I will say, as a little teaser, is that the false prince isn't quite so false in one sense. And so definitely a story that your readers will enjoy, especially if they like fantasy. I really enjoyed the story. I didn't want to stop reading it. She does a great job of creating dynamic characters. Sage is a dynamic character. Like, you want to hate him on one level because he's like kind of obnoxious and always like bucking the system. But it does leave readers intrigued and you end up rooting for him. And if you're looking for a clean fantasy that you want your, teen to read, I would definitely consider adding this one to the list. So this is The False Prince by Jennifer A. Nielsen. And definitely be on the lookout. I'm going to give some more reviews of the other books in the series as I read them. Because as you know, book series are really important to me because those are easy ways that they start out well and then things are sort of slipped in throughout. And so it's really important to kind of follow up and see where those series go, because that's definitely where I've been burned a few times, is that story or series started out well. I thought it'll be harmless throughout, and then I find that things are sort of slipped in. So definitely want to be diligent in all of those things. So hopefully that's helpful to you as a parent, and that you will join me next week for another book review.